Hello, everyone, with us and on Zoom. Welcome to the Duxbury Free Library's second of our candidate and budget forums. I'm Lester Lloyd of the Library Trustees. I'm chair and I'm assisting Martha Dennison, who is our vice chair who organized this event. I'm pleased to welcome Fernando Guitart, our selectman, and Dr. Danielle Klingaman, our superintendent of schools, who will be presenting this forum on the override budget. This forum is scheduled to run about an hour and a half to 7:30 p.m. In terms of override voting, the town budgets will be voted during town meeting on Saturday, March 14th, starting at 9 a.m. Early voting on the ballot question for the override starts March 16 at Town Hall, and in-person voting for the override budget on Saturday, March 28 at the Steel Athletic Center. And concerning our other forums, the library candidate forum for the Selectboard election is already viewable on our website. We're presenting two more candidate forums here at the library for school committee candidates on Thursday, March 12 at 6 p.m. and library trustee candidates on Wednesday, March 18 at 6 p.m. Now, Fernando and Danielle, I'm turning it over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Lester and Martha and Duxbury Free Library for hosting this event. And hopefully those attending and listening to Zoom will find this informative and help at the end of the day decide whether they vote yes or no on the override. And also we're going to touch on the Alton School elementary school. Yeah, elementary school feasibility study. So what I'll do is I'll kind of kick off the presentation and provide a high-level view of that, both for the town and for the schools, and then afterwards Danielle will fill in more detail on schools. So if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask during the conversation. And I believe also you'll be able to send questions to Martha via Zoom. So I will go ahead and start. Can I have the next slide, please? All right. I find it difficult to sit down, sorry. So we're asking for the mic. I think I'm loud enough. Being recorded. Was being recorded.
No, it's okay. That the microphone's for the room, not for the.
All right.
Yeah, there you go. You're fine.
All right. Thank you for that. So what I'm going to cover is essentially the override itself. We have a balanced budget. It's called 5A. And if folks want to understand a little bit more about that, you can ask those questions at the end of this information pack, so to speak. So what is the override, right? We're asking for $1.89 million in the override. And what it does for us is restores positions cut from last year and adds essentially public safety, fire, police, the schools, and positions in public works, beach operations staff, and basically essentially addresses town needs. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. So it's really important to note that this override, 74% of the amount of that $1.89 million is towards public safety and the schools, critical services that the town needs, and we aim to, and hopefully within the override, if that gets passed, we'll be able to provide those, meet those town needs. I think we learned a good lesson. Last year's override, we actually looked at our 5-year outlook, and we added what we call excess levy capacity to the override ask. I think this year we kind of reflected on that and said, let's just stick to what the town really needs. Those public safety positions, the school positions, and public works, beach operations, and the rest, right? So the actual ask is being reduced from $5.8 million that we asked for last year to by 67%, right? So we're really focused on, we need this override to pass, right? So I think there's no extras in there. It's just purely what the town needs. And I think a key message is that, we live within our means. People might argue about that, but we really do. This is basically, we're trying to gain, but the last time an override passed in the town of Duxbury was back in 1989. We've been able to live within the means, we've been able to live within the 2.5%, but events have overtaken us. Next slide. So maybe just maybe difficult to read, but the bottom line is, right, essentially rising costs. We've all seen rising costs in the supermarket, in our utility bills, in our insurance bills, and everything we pay. We've seen on a personal level, the same things happening at municipal level. Costs have risen more than the 2.5% limit that's imposed on us by law. We struggle, so we have no choice, right? So we're not allowed to increase within a certain limit sales and income taxes. So we got that 2.5% tax, which limits us. The amount of money we've got from the state that contributes and is about 19% of our 9%, sorry, of the revenue that comes into town, that has been going down over the years. Right? And so, like I said, we're not the only ones. Here we are. This is basically an article from 2025 in November. Basically, the largest tax override in mass history, looming Melrose and Stoneham. Right? We are not alone. The whole all the towns and cities in Massachusetts are facing the same problem: rising costs. Right? And we've all seen that rising costs, but we're limited by that 2.5%. So that's why we're asking for an override to basically essentially provide the services that this town needs. Next slide. So what exactly are we asking for? I'll let Danielle will go ahead in more detail as to what is going on in the schools. Basically, those are elements there. But what we're looking for in the town is 2 patrol officers. And again, remember last year in the override ask, Chief Carbone was asking for 4. All right, and we recognize, well, let's be frank, let's try 2. All right, he still has a need, but he can manage with 2 additional patrol officers. The same thing with firefighters and paramedics. For the fire department, we're looking for an assistant director for beach operations. The beach is a critical part. It generates a lot of revenue for the town. It is something that we all appreciate. And right now we just have one person running the beach on our behalf. And like I mentioned a year ago, he does need time off, right? We're pretty busy all year round now, so we need support. And then we restore really important positions in DPW and the highway and land resources. We've always had 2 admins in the select board to support that, and then 2 part-time positions in HR and services. So again, really important to repeat, 74% the patrol officers, the paramedics, and what's going through the school. That is 74% of the $1.89 million we're asking. Public safety and the schools. These are elemental and fundamental services which the town is required to provide and what the town needs. Oh, yeah. All right, so what will it cost me? That $1.8 million ask is basically over a year. The yearly estimated increase in the average single family home will go up by $325 per year. That's the ask, $325 additional property tax. The average single family home is now assessed, the average is $1.3 million, right? You can see here another example of just how everything has increased in terms of cost. If you want to buy a house in Duxbury, the average house back in 2011, 2014 was $600,000. The average single family home now in Duxbury costs just over let me see here, over $1.3 million. Okay, everything has gone up. Everything has gone up. The most important thing, there's a slide in there which I used last year, which Bessie Sullivan says I must not use to explain property tax increase. Right, very complicated. However, if anybody's interested, I do have it in the backup, so I can explain how your taxes go up or may go down, all depending on on your property valuation. But I think it's really important. We are providing information on the homepage of the town of Duxbury website, all right? So there's the link in there, and I've tried it, and I put in my address, 14 PowerPoint Avenue, and it tells me exactly how much my taxes will go up, property taxes, and also tell me how much my taxes will go up due to the feasibility study that is proposed for the Alden Elementary School. So with that, quick summary, but that's exactly what we're asking for in the override. We're basically 74% of that override represents public safety in the schools. And these are essential needs that we need to provide for the town of Duxbury. And with that,
Turn it over to
turn
me.
to you, Dan.
Hi, thanks, Fernando. I have, we've presented as a school committee many times between November and now that we're finally in March. So just want to say all of our budget materials are available on the Duxbury Public Schools website under the business department. So any school committee presentations that we've given so far. But tonight we're just going to be very, very brief about the override needs for the school department. So the school committee voted on one budget, and this is the school committee's recommended budget, which will be in the 5B article at town meeting. The budget that was recommended by me and the school committee was a 4.83% increase over spending in FY26, which we're currently in. And last year we did, when the override failed, we eliminated 19 positions overall. And so we had already proposed at that time in our non-override budget last year that we were eliminating 5.8 positions, I believe, just as part of our enrollment had declined and we were able to have some efficiencies. So overall, we lost 24 positions from last year to this year. Some of them were enrollment driven, but the 19 positions that would have been filled, or we had to have some people that we had to let them know that they no longer had a position. So we did suffer quite a devastating reduction in staffing last year after the override failure. And we were asked at select board meeting, when we were developing this year's FY27 budget, we'd be asking to restore all of those positions. And I told the select board at that time that we really needed to wait to see what the impact was overall on the lost positions and the consolidated classrooms that we faced. And so what we saw on the short term at the beginning of the school year was that our middle and high school students had a difficult time getting schedules that were their first or second choice of classes. And so that is, that's something that we have not seen as much of a struggle with in past years. This year was very challenging, and it's never a perfect science of having all of our sections of our high school and middle school classes being exactly the same size. There's sometimes you have classes that have 30 in them, and sometimes you have a section with 18, but just based on student selection and what world language they take and whether they're in the music program, that has a lot to do with the schedule. So we did have some frustration with the lack of choice and students not being able to take their first or second choice classes. That eventually worked itself out. Other issues that we started to recognize at the beginning of this year were that we had reduced the hours of our Aspen data manager, who manages all of our student information system that connects our students to the different courses that they take at the middle and high school and Schoology. If any of you are parents who have gone through middle and high school know about Schoology and where the students and teachers manage all of their coursework. So we had a lot of glitches with that. And the school year started rolling, and we really had to determine what were positions that we were really not functioning successfully without. One of those positions was our director of instructional technology. The other position was our Aspen data manager. We also were running elementary class sizes that we were feeling like they were really stretching the limit of what numbers we wanted to have in our classes. So when we looked at the FY27 budget, we knew that we were not in a position, and the community's not in a position to be restoring 19 positions for the school department. And so we prioritize those to recommend the restoration of 2 elementary classroom teachers, which would allow us at Chandler and Malden School to have 10 sections per grade level. And we also prioritize the restoration of a director of instructional technology, which works with the entire district. Some of you may know that we have Mike Woodford is the Chief Technology Officer for the town of Duxbury and the school department. his role is not to be in the classrooms helping students be able to log into their MCAS exam. He's really looking at the overall town and schools and the infrastructure. Do we have the network capabilities that we should have? Is our data safe and secure? So he's like a big picture, looking at this hardware and the software that the school department is running in the town and making sure that we are not at a cybersecurity risk. So that's where Mike Woodford comes in. The instructional technology director really focuses on the curriculum and instruction that's happening, where, like it or not, many of our curriculum programs are connected to online portions of the curriculum. So we have textbooks, we are working with hands-on, we're not always on the computers. That's something that we're very mindful of. We don't want our kids to be on computers all day long, but all of the curriculum does have components where the students may have to take an assessment on the computer, or they might have to navigate all of their homework and their course assignments being on the computer. So it's really important that we have somebody working at the student and teacher level, and we've had a real issue this year with just navigating that. Also, in this day and age, there's, we need to make sure we have student data privacy agreements with every single computer, technology-based instructional program that we're running. And that we always need to have those updated, and that's something that, we need to make sure we have a technology director in place for. The other, aspects of the F5B or the school committee recommended budget is just ensuring that universal free full-day kindergarten is available to all of our students. We are currently charging families $3,000 per student per year. It does place a burden on many of our families. They've shared that with us. They continue to share that with us. We work with families to the best of our ability if they confidentially express to us that they're having difficulty making the payments. But that is something that, as a public school district, we would love to be able to offer a free public education K through 12. That's not really possible in Duxbury to not charge some fees. We charge bus fees, we charge co-curricular fees, we charge fees for students to park in the parking lot, we charge athletic fees. There's different fees, field trips. Our students and our families are contributing to a lot of the parts of their education that are enhancing their experience, but also parts that are mandatory. Kids need to be able to get to school. We'd love to be able to say no bus fee for anyone. However, we know we need to charge some fees. Kindergarten, we feel, is a grade that is just as important as the rest of our 1 through 12 grades. And so that is something we have been talking about for years. And I know that initially many of you here in the room were residents that were part of the implementation of full-day kindergarten when it first began. I think it was 2012, around that time, but I think in 2026, our hope is that we can incorporate that into our instructional program. It also maintains our current staffing levels. We know that we're not going to be restoring the positions that were lost. However, we feel that it's important to maintain the structure that we have in place right now, which does give our students opportunities for intervention from reading specialists, math specialists. We feel as though our student and special education program are well supported. And I just think that we're trying to be as frugal as possible when we were putting together this budget, but also advocating for what we felt was the most impactful restoration of staffing and services we could provide. Go to the next slide, I believe. And so just to speak about the feasibility study a bit. So the other article, I don't know the article number. Rainey might know it. Alden School feasibility study is going to be on the town meeting. We will be doing a brief presentation at town meeting about the Alden School project, and it's really a study. It's not a building project at this stage. We are requesting of the community support to be able to study the Alden School building. 12. Thank you. Article 12 will be the Alden School feasibility study. What a feasibility study is, you've done them before. It was part of the building project with the middle and high school. Back in 2009 is probably when Duxbury began the process of looking at the possibility of a new middle and high school. At this point, we entered into the MSBA pipeline with the support of the school committee back in 2023 and 2024, as well as with the support of the select board, because we had to get signatures from school committee and select board to be able to submit a letter of interest to be considered for entrance into the pipeline for a potential building project. So what this means for the feasibility study is that, we would need $1.75 million allocated and committed to by the Duxbury community. 35.42% of that cost would be eligible for reimbursement as this goes along. So if this moves forward, we would be requesting a temporary debt exclusion from the community that would be on tax bill for 3 years. And it would be approximately $65 per year for 3 years. It's a temporary debt exclusion, and it's not a longer term debt exclusion that would go on longer. This would be a 3-year tax impact. What the feasibility study will tell us is, it's going to be a really extensive deep dive into what's happening in the Alden School. It's not just a kind of report on what's happening. It goes into every single building system, and it looks at the inside and outside of the building. The feasibility study would allow us to work with an owner's project manager who would oversee dozens of contractors who would be coming in, different consultants, to be able to look at their area of expertise, to be able to tell us what systems are at risk of failure, what systems are in good working order. They would be able to work with the community to ask Duxbury residents, what is it that you would be looking for? What's your priority? Would it be to determine if a renovation is possible, a repair is possible, just to give the community the information that we don't currently have about things that might fail in the future. We right now are more in a reactive mode in terms of repairing things as they break, as opposed to being able to proactively say, you know what, the HVAC system needs to be addressed, or this roof section. We have a plan for the roof, but we don't necessarily have all the building system plans that we need right now. We've heard a few questions come up. Why can't we just do this ourselves? If you want to be eligible for MSBA reimbursement, you have to work with the MSBA process to go through the feasibility study with them as a partner. They make sure that any community that's going through a potential project or renovation or repair would be working through the same guidelines. And you can't just say, we did a feasibility study ourselves and we'd like to submit that, and they wouldn't allow that. It has to be part of the community's commitment to support the feasibility study. It allows us to go through this next phase of the NSBA process. At the end of the feasibility study phase, we would have, with community input, a schematic design and a proposal of what would be the best next step. And at that time, the taxpayers of Duxbury residents would be able to vote on either a renovation, a rebuild, or they would be able to say, we simply can't move forward with the project right now, and that would be decided at the polls. But we're in a position right now where even last week during the storm, Alden is a older building, almost 80 years old. And we lost power down at this section of town. So our high school and middle school was running on generator power for a few days. Alden School was without power, and Chandler was running on partial generator. So everything was great. We had the power restored on Wednesday at the campus where Alden Middle School and High School are. And we were all in the building. The custodial crew had just arrived to begin to shovel out the many, many inches of snow that we were buried in. And as soon as power was restored, we checked the building and everything looked great. And then within 2 hours, because the building had been without heat for 4 days, as soon as the hot water tank and the heating kind of came back on, it was determined that there was some heating coil that had frozen. So as soon as the system started to run through, we had leaking HVAC units and water all over the place. So luckily we were there. Katie St. Clair, our wonderful facilities director, was there. She was able to address the issue immediately, turn everything off that needed to be, and we had to have cleanup restoration crew in overnight so that we could get rid of the water and start the process. But it's just an example of through no one's fault and everyone does the best they can with the buildings that we have in town here with our schools. We take care of the buildings to the best of our ability. But when you have an older building, you're going to have pipes freeze, you're going to have roof leaks. And so we find ourselves now likely going into another insurance claim for the Alden School, much like we did a few years ago when we had a roof drain issue and we had some water damage to the main office professional development wing. So I think either way with the feasibility study, we're really hoping to have the community support. So at the end of this process, we'll have a better sense of, Alden School, the needs, what we could plan for ahead of time for repairs if we opt for doing the repairs ourselves the way we have been. Or at that point, the community will have some options about what it would look like to do some renovations or rebuild sections. So you can do different options. When you have a feasibility study, you'll start working with an owner's project manager who would be overseeing that project, making sure it stays under budget. You don't want to spend 1.75 million. You want to be able to spend as little as possible to get the highest quality report at the end. And so that owner's project manager would be working with our community, would be at all of our building committee meetings, and we would be really hoping for a lot of community engagement through the next 12 to 18 months, so that the whatever the design is that is the desire of this community, we would have that at the end of this process before anything else was proposed to the community. And I have some handouts if anyone wants to grab one before you leave, and we'll post these on the website as well, that just has some information about the age of Alden School, when previous additions were put on, and just different points in history of Alden, because Alden has been, it was built in 1949, and then there were different times where additions were added and sections, and then the Performing Arts Center was added, and the gym was added, and the third floor, and so there's different age to different sections of the building there. So many of you have been there, have had children go through there. We gave tours last evening. I know that the time didn't work out for everybody because we had multiple things happening in town last evening, but before town meeting or before the town election, if anyone would like a private tour of Alden School to see some of the areas that are troublesome, we're glad to take people around in small groups. So just reach out to the superintendent's office if you'd like to take a walk around Alden School so we can show you some of the areas that are the most concerning, but also just show you the school if you haven't been in there in a while. Do I have another slide or is that? I think that's it. So
I think, Danielle, it's just important to reiterate one more time, right? The feasibility study doesn't automatically result in let's build another school.
no,
It's about understanding what our options are to be most effective in the use of our money, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
essential one. We will make the right decision, whether it's a renovation, rehabilitation, or addition or whatever, right? But that's the objective for this study, to make sure that we spend our money wisely, and does not mean automatically we're gonna build a new Alden school.
right. By supporting the feasibility study through the temporary debt exclusion, you are giving the green light for us to be able to do a deep exploration. It's really a study.
Yep.
Into the building. We're going to know a lot more about Alden School and where there's vulnerabilities, or where maybe the building is in fantastic shape. And structurally, with some simple repairs, that we'd be able to address some of our most concerning issues, which really are heat and humidity, the building taking on water. The safety and security of the entrance is something that we make sure that we monitor and adjust to the best of our ability, but we would really like Alden School visitors to be able to enter into Alden School without having the option of taking a right and going into the path or to the middle school and high school.
Yeah.
And we also don't love the fact that the middle and high school connects to the Alden School, and we aren't able to lock doors and keep people out. There are also some spaces that are not ideal for learning. The cafeteria is very loud. Students of today are, and I think even students of yesterday, are very sensitive when you finally have a break after being in school all day and you want to talk to your friends. The cafeteria acoustically is very overwhelming for our kids. We have to run 6 lunches, so they start eating lunch at the time many people are probably eating breakfast because they have the earliest start time. So the Alden School students arrive at 7:30 in the morning, and the first lunch begins at 10.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, they're already heading to lunch. It smells like spaghetti in here, and it's breakfast time. So they do the best they can to minimize the number of students that are in the cafeteria. But that is another area of
Okay.
less than ideal. Also, the location of the nurse's office to the classroom spaces are far distance. We would rather have the nurse closer to where our students are. And anyone that's been in Alden School, we don't really use that building in the summertime for any summer programming because it's not, there's no dehumidification, certainly no air conditioning. So the second and third floor become pretty unbearable in warm months. So that's never an option for summer school programs, Alden School classrooms. It gets very warm in June and very warm in September. So you will see classes looking for locations where they can cool off and not be on the second and third floor. So both the students and the adults that are in the buildings are super uncomfortable, and we do see the humidity impact the floor. So you'll always see mats and fans around on the floor so that we don't have anyone slipping. So it's humid in the warmer months, or even when it's not warm and it's just a very humid day, we have a lot of fans going. So we have cords and fans and mats, and we also have barrels frequently collecting leaking rain that's coming in. Any time we have a rainy, windy day here in Duxbury, we have a lot of buckets, and if the kids think nothing of it, they just walk around the bucket, but I think that we run out of available receptacles for sometimes the leaks that are coming in. So I just think that with the challenge with capital, there's a lot of capital needs in the community.
That's right.
It's not an opportunity for us to say, we'd like to take all of the town's capital to address some of the Alden issues. But if there's an opportunity for the MSBA to work with us to provide some reimbursement, that would be an option we'd like the community to be able to consider.
All right, well, that's a wonderful additional information, actually, and again, hopefully it helps you make your mind up whether you're gonna vote in favor of the feasibility study, but great additional context, thank you. Right, is it open time?
I guess it is.
Right, so how many questions have you
No
got?
questions.
No questions?
I have a question.
Yes,
Yes,
and you are?
I'm Calder.
Calder.
Calder Felty.
Yeah.
The last time I was in the school system was like 9 years ago, so this is great. So just a quick question on technology. Is the middle school and high school still using Mac Airbooks, or have you guys switched to a different laptop?
Were you one of the people that benefited from the MacBook Airs back in the day?
I was.
Yes, so I think initially when the school went one-to-one, when Ben Tantillo was the superintendent, it was MacBooks Airs that the students were working with, and it was an Apple environment.
Yeah.
I believe, oh my gosh, school committee is here this evening too, so I don't know how long ago it was, but I'm thinking it was at least 6 or 7 years ago, we've been using Chromebooks.
Okay, thank gosh.
As much as the students were not thrilled, especially the ones that had MacBook Airs for a couple of years.
Well, that's
just switch over.
pretty cool.
Yeah, so we now use Chromebooks because we want to make sure that the students have internet access to be able to access their online learning. And most importantly for us, we always have to make sure that the kids can take their MCAS assessment. They're all online. They're not on paper and pencil any longer. You probably did paper and pencil
I did.
MCAS. And so we have to make sure that our operating systems are capable to function with the Department of Education's MCAS testing system. And so they've been using Chromebooks for a while. It's helped with minimizing repair costs. And the students, the most important thing is that they can connect to the internet, and
Right.
they take a lot of, the students use those a lot. So sometimes they take a little bit of a beating. I saw someone drop one on the floor the other day right in front of one of the members of the tech department, but they're pretty sturdy. They're pretty good about being able to be repaired. And so that's been a really positive change for us, cost effectiveness wise. Our teachers still are using MacBook Airs. Right now, I think they're in their fifth or sixth year of use. And so they're starting to have a lot of issues with the battery and with the fans running. And so that was one of the reasons we have the teaching staff having an update on their computers for next year through the capital, if that's approved by town meeting.
It's good because I remember when we had MacBook Airs, even then they were just like taking a beating.
Yeah.
And I always, even back then I always thought like, what do we have these? And when I transferred out of the high school system to Plymouth,
Okay.
they had Chromebooks, thank you. So it's good to hear that.
Yeah. I'm glad you got to benefit from them back when it was first, when it first started here in Duxbury, but yeah, cost effectiveness, we wanted to, there's so much need for we're always having to request technology, whether it's network infrastructure, switches, Wi-Fi access points, and keeping up with devices, and we have projectors in the classrooms, so we frequently have to come to the town boards and talk about the technology needs. So that was one way we could be more cost effective.
All right, I have a second question in regards to Alden's boiler problem, I take it. Does Alden suffer from a problem where it's like an 80-year-old boiler that just has a bunch of different like additional parts attached to it to make up for the decades?
This is where Katie St. Clair really shines, when she can talk about the boilers. We have, I wanna say 8 boilers total between the pack and the 2 different boiler rooms at Alden School. They, were all in need of replacement at once. I don't know what's connected to them, but if you ever wanna go for a walk into the boiler room, it's a pretty scary place. I do have some photos of the boilers to show at town meeting, and so really old boilers, and I think that when you're dealing with original boilers in older buildings, they're definitely not as energy efficient. So I believe when we are able to replace them, we'd be able to function with fewer boilers than we currently have because of the age and size of these.
Because the university I went to had a very similar problem where you have a bunch of these older buildings that had their older boilers, and what they did was they would just like mash like different parts together because they couldn't get the parts anymore.
Right.
And it got so bad to the point where one boiler that they had just finished, they'd spent maybe a decade working on it, and they finally thought, yeah, it works, and it's a massive gas leak.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
Thank you. I believe there's a question at the back, yes? Hi.
Thank you for all the information. I have a question about the 1.75 million. Is that number put to us by MSBA, or is that based on square footage or project scope, or does it come from estimates from owners, project managers that we've spoken with?
Good question. So we have, we presented to select board what feels like maybe a month ago.
Right.
Where we have some information of where those, where that number came from. And so our Alden School Building Committee Chair, John Lemieux, used information from other projects that have been proposed and are underway in the state from 2020 to 2025, when he was compiling the information and sharing that with the building committee. So what John did was look at other communities that had elementary schools with as similar enrollment size as possible to Duxbury, and then looked at what the cost of the feasibility studies were. It can be a little tricky when you look up feasibility study cost online, because sometimes you'll find in a community, if you're looking it up, or if you're looking on the MSBA site, it'll say that the cost of the feasibility study, and sometimes it doesn't include the design cost. And so it's, you have to do a lot of research to find the total cost. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone that's here, but I believe when the high school and middle school project was completed, the town of Duxbury funded a $200,000 feasibility study before they entered the MSBA process to kind of see what the issues were with the middle and high school. And then when they applied, when everyone in Duxbury applied to go through the pipeline at MSBA, they then had to fund a $1.2 million, 1.1 million dollar. This is all estimating. We don't have this in front of us. The feasibility study at that time was about 1.1 million for the 2 schools back in probably 2009. So with inflation, we've seen a big rise in the cost of feasibility studies. And so we have some charts and graphs that are put together to look at what the enrollment of the school is and what the feasibility study costs were, and we're kind of right in the middle. So that's where the 1.75 figure came from, recent-ish projects. There was really nothing that's exactly comparable that would be the same size school, elementary, 700 students is the enrollment that the MSBA gave us to base the potential project or the study on. And we tried to be in the ballpark where we weren't looking to have the highest cost, but we also wanted to make sure we had some quality companies that came forward to offer to do the work. And our hope is that if this is funded, that we wouldn't spend the whole 1.75 million. Our goal would be for our owner's project manager to come in as far below that as possible, but there needs to be some room for contingency. So it was a comparison of other projects and then accounting for inflation, and that's where that number came from.
I think, can I just maybe follow on, right? It's a fair request, and what we're asking for is an appropriation, it's an amount. And then the owner project manager will go out and bid, right, to these selected companies. So we don't know what the answer is, but at least we got a fair estimate of what we think is gonna cost, and it might come in cheaper. Just fingers crossed, right? So, but if you have a follow-up question.
Yeah, my follow-up question is about the siting of a potential new school, and I realize that feasibility study may include an option to renovate, because that's what happened in 2009. They had to convince voters to vote for a brand new building, co-located building across the street, so the old high school completely was demolished. and moved across the street and built, together with the new middle school. But part of that feasibility study also outlined what it would take to renovate the old high school and middle school. And we all know the result of that was, so my question is about siting a new school, or the possibility of renovating, or rebuilding on the current site. And will that be part of the feasibility study, or will that come later?
That would be part of the feasibility study, and it would come from what the community requests for the people studying to look at. If we want them to look at a renovation at the same site that we have, they'll do that. If we want them to look at other potential town-owned land to look at as options, they'll do that. So that's where the community input comes in along the way. And so it's really what this community is desiring for in terms of what we would like the study to examine. So there's not one, they don't, as far as I know, they don't come in and tell us what they want to do. It's really community based, and it has to be a decision along the way. Otherwise, I don't believe that the MSBA benefits from really forcing expensive projects to be forced at the hand of the taxpayers, because you want there to be a project at the end that is what the residents are really seeking. So you probably went through this once before, so you should have been on the building committee. This time. You
I'm
remember
sitting
all
in
this
that
stuff.
room for a reason.
You, that was you. You get roasted.
Yeah, experts from the past building project.
Yes.
Yeah, I just, in looking at the study cost inclusion, I'm assuming, but I just want to clarify that they would also be looking at ADA and accessibility issues for people, you know, having just come from a really wonderful meeting this past week around inclusion and accessibility issues within the town. There's issues, and so, you know, I just want to make sure that that's certainly going to be front and center as well.
Absolutely. I think that one of the challenges when you try to do renovations yourself of a building and not go through MSBA. John Lemieux can speak to this better than I can, but I believe he said that if the assessed value of the building, if there's more than 30% of the cost, do you have that quote, Lisa? Write down what that is, but if you do extensive renovations of a current building, you reach a threshold where you need to bring all of the building up to code. And so that would be a challenge if Duxbury opted it down the road to do a renovation to be able to address some of the issues that we're facing in Alden. We would also face having to bring all of those considerations, because right now it is currently not as accessible as it should be. There is an elevator, an old elevator that breaks frequently, and we've had people get stuck in it this very year. One of our staff members, luckily, but there's just an
Personal nightmare.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's not ideal, especially for, luckily it wasn't a student when that's dealing with being on crutches or something. And so Lisa, do you want to share what the threshold is for the ADA?
Yep, it's 30% of the assessed value, which then triggers the accessibility and the code requirements to bring the building up to today's codes.
But that's something that we would, as a community, be discussing with the contractors that are coming in to look at, are we a candidate to be able to renovate the building ourselves? And what would be the code adjustment requirements, and what isn't currently compliant with ADA?
Great, thank you.
Any questions coming from online? Nothing. Hello? Anybody there? But was anybody else, sorry, any other questions from the audience? Mike, you have your hand up.
Just was thinking, what actual hardcore reusable professional fees are in this thing? Like, are we paying an architect? Are we paying somebody? Because these guys are gonna come in and bid on something they don't know. There's no like drawing or plan or actual thought. So how do you bid on that? How do you figure that out? And what's the point of that? I mean, how many professional fees are actually included in this budget?
So we have a slide that I'll share at town meeting that talks about sample of the components that go into a feasibility study. And so what the owner's project manager would be looking for a company that would be able to bid on. There's people that do these studies and that's their line of work. And so they're used to that, but I can't speak to this. I've never gone through this process myself, but if there's areas of expertise that that the company that's doing a majority of the architectural, in the infrastructure can't do the plumbing portion, that's where they'd be bringing in subcontractors, but I believe there's companies in the state that look for these projects, and if this is in the cost wheelhouse that they'd be, functioning in, they would bid on being, considered to be in charge of the feasibility study under the direction of the owner's project manager. So it's the owner's project manager's job to organize all of the different subcontractors that would be coming in to do the work, so that we had a comprehensive report at the end, as well as design up to 20% of what our preferred solution is. So through this process, it needs to remain well under the cost threshold that the community has allocated, and then all of those pieces that need to be in line with what an MSBA study needs to include would be completed as part of that. The MSBA has to approve the people that you hire, that the OPMs hire, are going to do exactly what is required by their guidelines. That makes sense. So we wouldn't be looking for many different subcontractors. You'd be having companies that can come in and do the majority of the work of buildings of this nature.
Okay, so now, just to clarify, and then I'll leave it alone, is, we're hiring a company to tell us what we need.
Yes, we would be hiring an OPM to organize that we would have a comprehensive building assessment and partial design of a preferred design over the next 12 to 18 months.
So they're telling us what we need to make a functional school.
Yeah.
Right, so I suppose there's a description what's required in the feasibility study, right?
Yep, and then there's an educational component of
Right.
that where we have to tell any company what we need in a school.
Right.
What are our requirements for an educational space? And then building wise, their job is to look at our current building, see what needs to be done to address the issues that we have.
Right, so is it fair to say that then that will be the scope of the feasibility study, right? And so the owner project manager will go out and ensure that in the feasibility study, all these elements, educational need analysis, conditions, site testing, cost estimate, alternative valuations, all that will be provided by whoever I know it's one contractor, several contractors will deliver that project scope, right, for the feasibility study.
Yeah, and I think actually right here in the library, there probably is still a copy of the 2009 feasibility study. It should be upstairs in the section where they have meeting reports and so forth. It should be still there. I might still have my copy.
Yeah, that's a great,
But it's a.
we
So
can
Mike, you know where to go next. On your way.
I think it's helpful for you to just mention maybe why we're choosing the MSBA for the reimbursement batch, so it's not truly a 1.75, correct?
Correct, so the cost of the study is the feasibility study cost is what needs to, the maximum cost is going to be what would appear on the ballot. You have to, as part of this process, put the total cost. We are contributing several $100,000 from our facilities use fund, as well as capital funding, $100,000 from capital funding that was not spent. So we were able to bring the cost of what the town would need to borrow down to, I think it was $830,000 up on the screen. So that's what the town would be borrowing, but what we're committing to as a community is up to 1.75 million for the feasibility study.
Yeah.
The reason you don't do this yourself, or some communities do these themselves, but the reason you would work with the MSBA is because you're eligible for 35% reimbursement of that total cost. Otherwise, if a community were to do their own feasibility study and make a plan, you would be funding the entire price of the feasibility study.
Yeah. So here's the chart here, which kind of breaks it down in more detail. It's self-explanatory, the 1.75, the reimbursement. There is a building use fund, right, which is sourced of fees. You can use it elsewhere, but it's a good place to put it. And then there's articles that we have appropriation left, so we've rescheduled that money into there for that net proceeds. So we need to borrow 830,000 to cover that 1.7 feasibility study.
Yeah, a couple of other questions that have come up, and then Casey, I'll get you, is that this takes about 12 to 18 months from the time that the feasibility study is, supported by a community to go through the next phase where the feasibility study and all of the, site analysis and all of the report is being developed. So we'd be looking at probably 24 months from the time that we begin this process where the community would have a preferred design to make a decision about through another vote. So we're looking at a couple of years that this would take to be able to have that completed report and partial design proposal. And somebody asked us earlier today, what happens if Duxbury doesn't decide if this is the right time to do a feasibility study? Can we come back next year and ask at town meeting, would we consider having the feasibility study funded? The answer is no. So right now we're in an eligibility phase. And so when we were accepted into the MSBA pipeline in November of 2024, they said, congratulations, Duxbury, your project is worthy of consideration. We're inviting you into the pipeline. Your 270-day eligibility phase begins on June 1st, 2025 and ends on February 28th, 2026. Right now it is March something. Is it March 5th?
Yeah.
So we had to go to the MSBA and say, might we have a 30-day extension because our annual town meeting is on March 14th and our annual town election is on March 28th. So MSBA gave us a 30-day extension and they're waiting to see what the voters decide in Duxbury. They asked us to contact them right away after the town election. And hopefully it gets to the town election and we support it at town meeting. And if the project's supported, we move forward through the study phase. And if it's not supported, we are not in the we are not in the MSBA pipeline any longer. We would have to reapply in a few years to see if another project for Alden School would be considered. So you don't get to hang on for a year or 2 years. You have to either, you're in that eligibility phase and it expires. If it's supported, wonderful, we'll move through the next phase with community input hopefully along the way. Otherwise, we would be back to square one before we embarked in this process, and we would continue to just repair as things begin to leak.
Yeah, spending good money after that.
Is that what you wanted me to say for the time?
Yeah, let me, I was gonna talk about 5A, but I will now.
Yeah, I was just curious, just
Yeah.
a curiosity question. So who hires the project manager? Like, is that like from an approved list of people or something? Where does that, is it come from?
I think we'd have to ask Anne Warden. So once we're officially in the feasibility phase, MSBA would work with the building committee to determine how you, I don't know if it's not going out a bid, but how you are able, as a community, to decide on who, I don't know if OPMs would come to us with a proposal or if they're part of the companies that you.
So like that's on next step.
It's the next steps, and I'm not really sure how that happens, but I know moving forward, the building committee would be, if this project continues, we would be having the building committee interview potential candidates for things like OPM and potential companies that were interested in working with us. Is that your recollection that the building committee interviewed potential OPMs?
Yeah, and it's a fairly short list of companies that have this sort of expertise. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just wanna, well, go ahead, sorry, you had another question, yes.
It's separate from the school project, so.
Yes.
Not that first, but it's a
Okay.
separate one.
All right, then. So, this is the 5A budget. It's a balanced budget. And I think the key message is just to reinforce again. Basically, our budget is all about essentially 70% of that is budget is for public safety, education, DPW, and paying off debt. 70% providing basic services that the town requires to have. You need to have police and fire. You need to have your roads. Well, as we saw after the blizzard, you need them cleaned out. You need to be able to drive, right? You need to have the roads safe, and you need to have your trash to hold and everything, right? So 70% public safety, education, DPW, and debt, stuff that we've already committed to spend, right? We've already taken this debt off, and so we have to pay pay back the principal plus interest, all right? 70%. And our total budget for the 5A budget, balanced budget for this year is just over $100 million. So our ask for the override is 1.8, 2%. Still a big number, but that's our budget. Our base budget is over $100 million to provide the basic services, vast majority, what the town needs. You have a question? Yeah.
Well, I have no interest in the school building project at all. With
That's-
You don't want to talk about it anymore.
I like hearing, but it's not a question just as a citizen, you know,
Yeah.
when we add people. And we add people to the police force, we add people to the school budget. I know it's hard for me to truly understand and get my head around what that means, adding those the two teachers back. Other than some numbers, and I know you're gonna have some good numbers, I assume, in terms of like student teacher ratio. Or even score impact, or behavior impact, or things like that. I would just recommend that would be helpful, because I just trying to understand what the impact of not having those teachers, or on the police force too.
Yeah.
I have a general sense that I'm perfectly fine here in Duxbury. I have no real insight in terms of, response times and things like that. I know last year they brought some of those numbers to the party. I assume we'll have that again, but I just know being a citizen here, it's hard for me to really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we'll have more color to all that, so we can make a better decision.
Helpful feedback, because it's always a balance of, it's a long day at town meeting. And we know that the residents want to be able to ask questions because they've been following along with the meetings through the months before town meeting. But it's helpful for me to know that the reasoning behind adding 2 classroom teachers back would be meaningful for you to know. And what our class size our desired class size is always as low as possible. And so currently we're getting dangerously close to 24 and 25 students in an elementary school classroom with the reductions we faced last year. And so we're always trying to have our class size be as close to 20 as we can. I just want to say, when I say that, we are certainly not at the maximum level of students that we're allowed to have through the teacher contract. But I think in terms of when you speak to teachers, what is a reasonable number in 2026 to be able to give the students the individualized attention that they require and deserve? Having classes higher than 22, when it gets to be 22, 23, 24, 25, especially, we want to keep the K through 2 classes as low as possible. But when you start to have 24 fifth graders in those classrooms at Alden School, they're big kids and they're tall. We want to be able to do small group work and break the kids up into different seating areas, and it just gets to be cumbersome, and it's hard to manage the individual needs of the students when you have that many students in your class. So I'll share that at town meeting very briefly.
And I've got one example, and that's the fire department. So the average response time last year in 2025 was 5 minutes, right? The gold standard is 4 minutes. 5 minutes is pretty good. That extra minute, I'm sure, would be appreciated, right? So what happened to be able to deliver that 5 minutes? Chief Reardon actually has to call back firefighters that are on their time off. All right, so they've done their shift, they're back at home, and to be able to respond to the number of calls we have, and they are every year we see increasing calls, he has to call them back from rest. All right, so therefore there's a cost associated with that overtime, and overtime, as you know, is more expensive than regular time. So additional 2 firefighters will allow him to staff complete 4 shifts. He'll be able to provide that. So it will have a reduction in overtime, and it will have obviously a reduction in actually calling people out when they should be at home resting and basically getting ready for the next shift. So, but that's a good point, and we'll make sure that both Chief Carbone and Chief Reardon provides a little bit more data to support the reason why he's asking for the 2.
I did get a question,
Yeah,
actually 2 questions.
right.
I don't. Right. All right.
Hopefully, maybe I should be.
And I just got to follow, because I just don't know for sure. Instead of paying the consulting fee of $1.75 million, why not use the 2009 feasibility study as a baseline and add the maintenance issues that have occurred since then? That's question 1.
So the 2009 feasibility study was for the middle school and high school project. And if we do not have any comprehensive building assessment of Alden School that we are able to work with, we did do a roof assessment a couple of years back through Garland. And that has enabled us to be able to prioritize different sections of the roof for repair, because if we were to have repaired the whole roof at once, which it needed, was probably upwards of millions of dollars, so.
More than that.
More than that,
More than that.
even more than that, says our person that manages all the capital.
The other question, and I don't know if this is for schools or schools and town, but it's during COVID time period, the budget was increased but was never readjusted to pre-COVID levels. Why?
So I can say that the schools received funding through ESSER during the COVID period. And so when I first started working in Duxbury in 2018, I know that we were speaking at the budget presentation process to school committee that we were kind of approaching a fiscal cliff in the coming years, and that when the pandemic hit, there was some federal funding that became available to schools. So we were able to kind of pause our emergency situation that we were starting to face, so that we were able to maintain our staffing levels without having to ask requests for money from the town. When the ESSER funding ran out, as I spoke about earlier, we had added 5.5 positions during that time period, knowing that we wanted to increase the interventions that we had for students. Students have been out of school for a period of time that we knew was detrimental. And so that's why I wanted to point out that we have cut 5 positions in 2020, FY25, and then again in 2026, FY26, we had reduced 23 positions. So we did eliminate the positions that were added, and we also benefited from ARPA funding during the period of COVID. And so that was town projects and some school projects that we had had on capital for a long time. One example from the schools was that we had open classrooms when the new building was built. And I don't know if you've seen those, you should come by. So when the new high school and middle school was built, there were some open classrooms that were intended for flex space, so that they weren't intended to see, you didn't get to go there though, did you?
No, I was the first 7th grade there, so.
Okay, so you didn't get to go to the high school, but the high school had 4 open classrooms that were intended to be flexible space that we've always had to use as classrooms. And in times of safety and security, whenever we had a lockdown or an emergency, the kids that were working in those open classrooms had to go into a nearby classroom to be able to lock down safely. Through ARPA funding, we were able to enclose those classrooms and make sure that they were safe learning spaces with walls, and they're electrical and projectors, and they look like every other classroom at the high school now. So we benefited from ESSER and ARPA. And then we had those years after that we've been managing the last few years where we haven't had those funds any longer.
Yes, question, repeat the question again to make sure I understand it.
So it was that the budgets went up during COVID and didn't come back down after COVID.
Budgets went up after.
During COVID, the budget was increased but never readjusted to the pre-COVID level.
Okay, I'm looking at Rennie. I thought we furloughed and we shut down the town. I mean, I think the costs went down and we basically cut back on services.
I have to look back on this.
Yeah, so I don't think our costs went up during COVID, so maybe I've got that wrong, but that's why I asked the question again. It wasn't clear to me. Cost have, we did reduce our expenditure during that time because people were furloughed. Okay. Any further questions? Are there any other questions online? Online. Well, thank you very much.
By the way, Fernando.
Yes, sir.
The budget was constricted at that point, it did not expand.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought, yeah. The budget was constricted. So I just want to thank you all for listening and for your questions. Thank you for those folks that are online, and hopefully we'll watch it later on. I just want to repeat the message, it's really important. Annual town meeting is Saturday, March 14th, and please do turn up. And like I said, hopefully you have enough information to be able to decide whether you want to support Article 5B, the override, or the Alden School feasibility study, Article 12. So that's what you have to do. That's your decision at the annual town meeting. And then on the ballot, whether you're early voting or on the 28th, which is the day, the actual day, then you'll be, you have a choice there, that there's a select board, there's quite a few moving items there for you to place your vote. But that's your opportunity as a town to go ahead and vote yea or nay on the override and or the feasibility study. So hopefully you have enough information and you feel in a good place to make that vote for yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.